Odds are if you're watching this video, you just ordered some brand new air suspension. If that's the case, congratulations. Or you're on the fence about ordering some air suspension for your car, which if that's the case, or either of those are the case, you've come to the right place, because today we're gonna be unboxing and taking a look at the Airlift 3P air suspension kit that you can get from martiniworks.com. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so first things first, you're gonna wanna set aside at least 3 hours to actually unbox the components of your new Airlift Performance air suspension kit. Joke aside, there is a lot of components here. Now, I know that might be a little bit scary, it might be a little bit intimidating, but the good news is that if you are capable of installing something like coilovers, and we always kind of joke, if you can install coilovers and you've done like a radio install, you can install air suspension. They make it pretty straightforward with the wiring and with the harnesses that get included here. Another real quick thing to note here is that this is a full kit. You have your management, you have your air struts, you have your tank, your compressors, all of that, which Martini Works is actually one of only very few out there that you can buy a full kit like this for your car. So if you are looking for air suspension, we got it for you. So the first thing we're gonna take a look at here is the actual airbag itself, or the actual air suspension part of this. So if you are familiar with coilovers, if you've installed coilovers before, you'll notice that this looks pretty similar, and that's because it really is. The only difference being is this guy right here. Instead of a coil spring, you have a bag that gets filled with air. Looking around here, you do see that you get a threaded lower body. This is adjustable just like a coilover is as well. The reason you would want to adjust that is so when you're at ride height that you're not at something like 100 PSI, which is gonna be really, really stiff, especially on something like an E30. If you want your ride height pressures to be more at like 60, you can fill your bags up to 60 and then adjust your lower bodies to help dial in that ride height a little bit better. It's something that you're gonna have to tinker around with. It's something that is specific to each vehicle. If you do know somebody that has bagged a car similar to yours before, go ahead and ask them. I run the Airlift 3P kit on my Mazda RX-8, and I had to do the same. I've reached out to some other RX-8 owners who were running air suspension, and they gave me some great recommendations on where to start. Going over the strut itself, you'll notice that you have the actual inlet for the air suspension. So this will be the braided line that comes off of your Airlines, coming from your management, that's going to inflate the bag. You'll also notice that if your vehicle allows for, you will get camber adjustment as well. If your vehicle does have the ability to have adjustable camber, as long as you're not running like a double wishbone or something like that, if your suspension geometry allows for it, you will get it with your Airlift struts. Now this, just like the front, is going to replace the coil spring that normally sits in the rear of the vehicle in that spring perch. We also do get some new mounts or some new perches for these to sit in as well. Again, the instructions do go over this really, really well. They do make them vehicle specific, so if you're getting this, you're kind of a little worried on where you're going to be going with all of this, the instructions do help out a ton. Now these leader lines will hook right up to your airbag or your front strut, and then with these quick disconnects that you also put on there, this will go to your plastic airline that will run from each corner of your vehicle all the way back to the management itself. You get some spanner wrenches, you do get damping adjustment as well, so you do get a lot of different adjustability other than your on-the-go ride height with your air suspension. Now this is probably the most common setup, or the most popular setup that we see people snag from Airlift, essentially because it is the most straightforward and it is the easiest to install. Now what I mean by that is that they have two different systems. They have the 3P, which we're going to be taking a look at here, and they have the 3H. The 3P standing for a pressure-based system. That's the most, I guess, rudimentary system that you could go off of. The 3H standing for a height operated system, meaning that you're going to have height sensors that are on each corner that are going to tell the vehicle how high or low it is. Now the height's going to be a little more accurate. It's going to make sure that your vehicle is perfectly level. It's going to make sure that the corners are not going to be uneven or anything like that. However, it does get a lot more involved with running sensors and mounting them and hooking up the linkages, and it does just give another opportunity for error as well, which is why we see a lot of people tend to go with just the 3P. Get, again, another full printed color manual to walk you through everything, and we're gonna go ahead and take a look at our manifold. Now this is what is gonna distribute your air to the four corners of your vehicle. It's gonna take the air that the compressor puts into the tank that we have over there and distribute it where it needs to go. Now this is a heavy son of a gun, but it is also essentially the brain box for your car. This is a very, very important piece of your air suspension system. Now, Airlift has moved to a new type of manifold. You'll see that the inlets and outlets here are threaded. Now, you can put the normal quick disconnects in there if you would like. However, they did it this way, so if you want to run like a hard line setup, if you really want to do a custom trunk setup, you can just get some normal fittings to go in here as well, and you don't have to deal with running from a plastic line or getting some sort of adapter to go into a quick disconnect. You can just run it like this if you want, or if you're just gonna tuck it away, run the plastic lines, the quick disconnects are in here as well. All of that and the mounting hardware you can find in this box as well. And then the other key piece, or the crucial piece that you'll find in the actual management package, will be the controller. So this is the Airlift 3P controller. It looks just like this. A wire is essentially going to run from your manifold all the way up to your controller. It's all included in this massive wiring harness that it is really plug and play. You shouldn't really have to worry about splicing anything together. You shouldn't really have to worry about cutting or soldering anything. It should just hook up like you want it to. Now, if you're running 2 compressors in your system, you can get an additional harness that hooks up to this as well. Now, that will allow you to run the 2 compressors to the tank. Essentially just another harness that you bolt into here. So this controller will sit up front by you, so you can control your ride height. You can also mount this vertically or horizontally. That's simply changed by undoing these 2 screws in the back and rotating this plate. It's a really easy thing to do depending on how you want to mount your controller, but also good to note that if you are looking to just do the Bluetooth setup, that you can get the app for your phone as well. You can control everything from your phone. It works pretty decent as long as you're close to the car, but this is always a good thing to have. Just kind of moving down the line here to the next piece that you're gonna have is going to be your compressor. Now, of course, this is gonna be what's responsible for filling up the entire system. So you're either gonna have 1 or 2 of these, and then it's gonna feed air directly into your tank. So this is a 5-gallon front-facing port tank that we have here in the polished setup. I believe you can get it in a raw finish as well, but the polish does look really, really good. And then the front-facing ports on here are an option too. So you can get either the front-facing or like mine that I have, the ports are actually on the side. This will have to be essentially what they call isolated. You'll notice that there's some rubber grommets and stuff on here. That's because this thing is going to shake like a motherfucker. This thing is going to make a lot of noise and racket if you just bolt it up to something solid. So usually when you set this up, they do a good job of giving you the isolators and things like that to keep it as quiet as possible, but it's still gonna make a lot of noise. Going back to the harness here, this is a big old beefy harness. This is all one piece, and it does get a little overwhelming at times when you're trying to snake this thing through the entirety of the inside of your car, because you're trying to keep it nice, you're trying to keep it clean. Just stick with it. I promise it's gonna work out. Essentially, you're just gonna hook up your manifold, you're gonna supply the power to your air compressor, you're gonna run the controller wire to the front, you're gonna need a ground, you're gonna need your power. It does lay out actually really nicely. It just, like I said, is a lot. Don't worry about it, stick with it, you got it. They made it as easy as they could. And of course, the other crucial component here. Now this right here is 1/4-inch Airline. This is plastic Airline, and it needs to be cut very, very cleanly. The good news is that Airlift is really nice enough to give you this fancy Airline cutter. Now what I mean by cutting it cleanly is that you're going to want to get as square of a cut on these Airlines as possible. With these quick push to connect or push disconnect adapters here, it's very easy to get an air leak if you're not completely flush with your Airline, which is why they include something like this. So just make sure, take your time, get a good clean cut with your Airline. Don't use your dirty kitchen scissors or anything like that. Use the tool that they give you. Make sure that you're installing it correctly so you don't get any air leaks, because that is an absolute pain in the butt to trace down when you're installing an entire air system. As I said, this is 1/4-inch Airline. You can also get this in a 3/8 option as well. So you probably see that if you've been shopping around for air suspension, if it's a 1/4-inch system or 3/8 system. Essentially all that means is like, how much air do you want to move and how fast do you want to move it. A 1/4 inch is your standard size for Airline. They recommend if you have like a bigger car or something that you want to send a lot more air or get rid of a lot more air faster, going up to something like a 3/8 that allows for that to move a lot more quickly. 1/4 inch, usually what you're gonna go with 99% of the time, it's gonna work really good for you. So just an option out there as well if you've been wondering why you're seeing different sizes of Airlines when it comes to your air suspension kit. Just kind of floating about here, you'll notice a bunch of different packages of hardware and fittings. The good thing is that it all does go together relatively simple. The instructions do a really good job of telling you which fittings and which things need to go where, as well as they all have some sort of thread sealant on them as well, whether that's Teflon tape, whether that's any other sort of thread sealant. So you don't really have to worry about that. Just make sure that it's in good shape, make sure that it is installed decently, and if it's not, doesn't hurt to keep another roll of Teflon tape on hand or any other sort of thread sealant, just to make sure, again, that you're not having to trace down any air leaks when you're done. Now again, I know that was a lot that we just went over. I know it looks like there's a ton of parts, and because the truth is, there's more involved to this than your typical coilover installation, but the good news is that Airlift did a really, really good job of making it as user-friendly as possible. If you're going into an air suspension install and you're a little worried about it, just take some time, do your research. I'm sure there's probably a video out there of someone doing it for their car as well. Have a friend stop over and help you go into it with a plan. And then of course, my last tip for you is, just take your time with the install. This is definitely something that you're not gonna wanna rush, simply because, when you look at air suspension and you hear people talk about air suspension, they're like, oh man, it's a very, unreliable system. You can have a lot of problems with it. And you can if you don't take the necessary steps to avoid, hoses rubbing on things, your airlines moving, things not tightened down all the way, not taking the time to check, are the threads actually sealed? Are the things in the right place? That's when you hear a lot of times people running into issues. Things are rubbing up against the actual bags of the suspension and they cause them to pop, things like that. Just take your time when you're doing the install. If something doesn't seem right, it's probably not. So just take your time to double check everything, and I guarantee you're gonna be ready. So that is a look at this complete Airlift Performance 3P air suspension. So again, we do this at Martini Work. We offer the full kits for you. We're one of very few out there that do that. So if you ever have any questions on air suspension for your car or what that all looks like, or if you have any questions on it, please drop a comment down below, shoot us a DM on our socials, shoot us an email on our website. We'll be more than happy to help you out with that process, because pretty much every one of us here, I believe, has installed air at least once or twice on their cars, and can definitely provide some insight, or maybe if there's just a goofy question you have, we'll be more than happy to help out. So if you're looking for air suspension, you can check it out at martiniworks.com. Thank you all so much for watching. See you in the next one.